to continue looking at when God broke his silence. And we're going to look at how and what took place when King Jesus shows up. And what I desire more than ever is that we become part of his story of what God is doing and what Jesus can do in the life of the individual who allows Jesus in. What God can do in those but God moments in our lives. Because that's what we're going to see as we close chapter 8, is what God does when he shows up. And what we're going to see in verses 23 through 27 is when Jesus showed up, he came to overcome storms. Right? In verse 23 it says, "Now when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him, and suddenly a great tempest arose on the sea, so that the boat was covered with the waves. But he was asleep. Then his disciples came to him and woke him, saying, 'Lord, save us! We're perishing!' But he said to them, 'Why are you fearful, O you of little faith?'" How do you hear that? It makes all the difference in the world. Tone is everything at that statement, you know. But how do you hear it? You could hear it as, "What are you thinking? Oh, you of little faith, come on, McFly." You could hear it that way, or you could hear it from this brokenness. Man, why are you so afraid? You have nothing to be afraid of. I got it. Oh, here's the problem. You have little faith. That says, "Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the seas, and there was a great calm. And the men marveled, saying, 'Who can this be, that even the winds and the seas obey him?'" So we know prior to getting in the boat, they had a long day of ministry. And Jesus tells his boys, he says, "Hey guys, let's go. We're going to get on this boat, and we're going to go to the other side of the sea. We're going to head on over to the other side." So he gives them the instructions. They all get in the boat. And then what does Jesus do? He crawls down to the bottom of the boat and goes to sleep. He takes a nap. Jesus was sleeping. Now, my assumption is that while Jesus was just sleeping, the disciples were up, maybe drinking a cup of coffee or sipping on some tea with their pinky out. I don't know what they drank back then, But there they were sitting up on the top, and they were talking about all that took place that day, the day before, "Hey, this is what Jesus, hey, remember, you know what, did you see all these people that I ministered to?" I mean, I could see it now. They're arguing, they're contemplating, they're bragging, they're talking about all of this stuff. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes a storm. Waves are crashing. The Bible tells us that there were these massive waves. They're freaking out. And all of a sudden, their world was rocked by a storm. Does any of this sound familiar? You ever been there? Man, you just had this great day, this great experience, and God was just so real in your lives, and man, everything was going good, and Jesus is napping, we're reminiscing, and all of a sudden, boom! The carpet's yanked out from underneath you, the waves start crashing all around you, and you're like, "Oh no, what do I do?" I mean, we've all been hit by unexpected storms. We've had a lot of flooding in our house, as you know, over the last 10 years. So I kind of, when I hear about a storm, I freak out, like, oh no. And I do all I can. And here's what I've realized. The meteorologists are useless. Absolutely. All they're good for is making you be afraid. Right? We're supposed to have these 1,000-year storms, and the world's going to fall down. The sky is falling. We're going to drown. Better build a boat, right? I mean, because, this is it. And what happens? It sprinkles for 30 minutes. And you know why it sprinkles for 30 minutes? Because I spend 16 hours preparing for this once-in-a-lifetime storm, blowing gutters and making sure everything's going to be draining the right way, and freaking out and worrying over what. I don't want my house to flood again. We had tarps. Anybody bought a tarp lately? Tarps are expensive. Holy cow. We bought a tarp for our tent trailer like 3 months ago. It's destroyed. I'm like, man, it was like $60. So we're like, oh, we got to get a new tarp. I'm like, no, I'm not going to buy another tarp. So I bought one of those carport things. Because you know what? They're thicker tarps and it's a carport. And then I could get in and out of my trailer when I want to. I thought I was a genius. Because it was going to rain. Better do it now. So Connie and I are out there in the dark putting this thing up, putting it over, because we're preparing for this big storm. Didn't happen. Meteorologists, they breed fear of the unknown. The bottom line is we all have unexpected storms in life. I know that I have. But what amazed me in preparing for today was, as I was reading some of the commentaries on this section, how many people tried to explain how this storm happened. Why? Why do we feel we need to explain storms? It's just that. It's a storm. It's a trial. It's something that's going to be difficult. That's what a storm is. But the other things that storms do is they come and they go. This too will pass. Right? It stopped raining after 40 days in Noah's time. The storm, we're supposed to have El Nino. I haven't met him yet. Storms come, they go. They're a reality in life. But we try to make sense of them. We try to explain them. It's so much like us. But when the storms of life hit us unexpectedly, we immediately try to make sense of them. We say things like, if God is a loving God, then ... And we try to explain it. We're trying to make sense. But what it does is it leaves us wondering where Jesus is in the midst of our trials. Or why is he allowing them to happen at all? Jesus was able to sleep because the storm that he was about to face, or that the disciples were about to face, didn't faze him. He knew that storms come and go. He knew that. Ever felt like Jesus was sleeping when you were struggling? That's what these guys were experiencing. The problem comes when we try to explain the storm, because what happens is we lose sight of the solution. We try to make sense of it, and we try to figure out how we could ease the effects of the storm rather than have peace in the middle of it. I wonder how long it took these guys to wake up Jesus. These are the questions I ask. Like, how long were they out there? Oh no, what are we going to do? We're going to die. Let's throw stuff overboard. I wonder who came up with the idea of like, hey, why don't we just go wake up Jesus? It's not simple. The solution was sleeping downstairs. Just go wake him up. I wonder when it happened. We may never know when, but we do know how they were feeling. These guys were desperate, feeling like they were perishing, feeling like the end was at hand. This was it. They were probably feeling like, Jesus doesn't care for us, man. He's just down there sleeping. We're going to die. But yet, all the while, what they were doing was forgetting what Jesus said to them. Jesus said, get in the boat. Let's go to the other side. Jesus fully intended to get to the other side. The Christian walk isn't going to be absent of storms, but it is going to require faith from us. And it will have storms, and we will face them. And as followers of Jesus, we need to remember that Jesus is with us in the storms that we face, and that he has the ability to overcome them. Jesus came not just to overcome life's storms, but he also came to be our peace in the middle of our storms. And this is a direct byproduct of Jesus' proximity in our life. You see, when we're facing storms, we need to realize that he's right there. He hasn't left. You may think he's sleeping, but he's still in the boat. You see, Jesus was and is in the boat with us. That's the hope that we have. And what I want to encourage you with today is this. It's the same Jesus who spoke to the storms and the waves ceased, who is speaking to the storms in your life, who is offering to be your peace and is with you in the midst of the storms that you're facing. And so here's my story. My story is this, that Jesus showed up when I was trying to make sense of my fears and storms, and he became my peace, and he walked with me. The second thing that we're going to see is that Jesus came to heal the hurting. So they get to the other side, and it says, when he'd come to the other side, the country of the Gergesenes, there met him 2 demon-possessed men, coming out of the tombs, exceedingly fierce, so that no one could pass that way. If you want to get the full effect of this, you should read the accounts in Mark and Luke as well. It's fascinating. But you can imagine, here these guys are. They finally made it to the other side of the shore. They went through the storm. So after enduring a storm, they finally get to the other side. And I just picture them thinking this, finally, we can rest. We're on land. We've made it. What they would be faced with, there is no way that you could ever prepare for that. None. They were face to face with 2 demon-possessed men, I should say. I believe that I've been in the presence of 2 people in my entire life that I would say was demon-possessed. 2. Once at Christian Beret, and the other when I was in Kenya in 2004. I don't remember much from the Christian Beret experience, but I do remember vividly the experience in Kenya when we were doing a homeless feeding, and I was standing face to face with this guy that you just knew. I mean, it was like he looked at my soul and he was ready to kill me. And there was that look in his eyes, and the hair on my neck stood up. And like everything else, when faced with things like that, we try to make sense of it. And I'm going to tell you this, you can't. Here's the interesting thing to me. We may not be face to face with demon-possessed people where we'd be like, yep, there's definitely a demon in that person. But what's interesting is we use the term to describe somebody stuck in addiction with they have a demon. Interesting fact. The term for witchcraft in the Bible, it's the word pharmakia, where we get our term pharmacy. So there is some sense of opening ourselves up to the demonic realm when we are under the influence of drugs. That's just the truth. I think we see more pictures of demon-possessed people than we do in person. You've seen the mugshots of these people that commit hideous crimes, and there's just that look in their eyes. There's that disconnect. But what we need to be able to do in such a time is see beyond the outward appearance. That's exactly what Jesus does here. We need to be able to have a compassion on the individual, looking beyond their situation and seeing the person. You see, these 2 men, and I want you to feel this for a moment, these 2 guys that were demon-possessed, that were controlled by something outside of themselves, they had a mom who probably woke up every morning weeping for her sons. They had a hurting father that was probably blaming himself for where they were. They had siblings and friends that struggled with losing people they cared about. These 2 men who were by these demons placed in the tombs. Think about that. let that sink in. Let that hit your heart and realize that there's people that we know that aren't who they want to be, that are struggling through things like we struggle with. And they're hoping that we will have a heart that can see beyond what they're struggling with and see the heart that Jesus came and died for. But it goes on, and suddenly they cried out saying, "What have we to do with you, Jesus, you Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" Now a good way off from them, there was a herd of many swine feeding. So the demons begged him, saying, "If you cast us out, permit us to go away into the herd of swine." And he said to them, "Go." So when they had come out, they went into the herd of swine, and suddenly the whole herd of swine ran violently down the steep place into the sea and perished in the water. There you have your first deviled ham. So here you have it. You have these guys. These demons are talking. We're told that there was a legion of demons, and we could try to figure out how many was in a legion, but I think that that's secondary. I don't think it really matters. It's not what it's all about. You see, there's a couple things that we need to take note of here. The first, these demons knew who Jesus was. They knew him. These demons knew that there was a time, and that their time on earth was limited, and that there's going to be a time where they would be judged, so that they knew judgment was coming. And they knew it wasn't then. These demons were all about what? Destruction. They didn't care about the guy or the pigs. And then finally, Jesus shows us how to deal with demons. And I love it. So here's the fascinating things to me. The demons knew who Jesus was even when the disciples didn't. And you can see that by the contrast of two different statements. The statement in verse 27 by the disciples, "Who can this be?" And then the one of the demons, "Jesus, you Son of God," verse 29. But what I love more than that is how Jesus dealt with the demons. He doesn't argue with them. He doesn't talk to them. He doesn't even rebuke them. No, he simply says, "You choose your own fate." And then the only thing he said to him, "Go." That's it. That's the only conversation that Jesus had. Go. It's crazy. You see, sometimes I think we pray to the wrong people. When we rebuke demons and we pray that Satan gets out of there, who are you talking to? Like, we don't pray to demons. We don't pray to Satan. We just simply say, "Go." That's it. We don't need to wrestle. We don't need to argue. We don't have conversations. Like, "See ya. You're out of here. Get out." But we get some insight to the demons. These demons were all about destruction. That's all they cared about. And think with me for a moment. Look at what happened to those pigs. If we play the conclusion all the way through, had they not left these men would face the same fate as those pigs did. If Jesus didn't show up, if Jesus didn't endure a storm, and we'll see in a minute, if Jesus wasn't willing to be rejected by the multitude, these men would never be set free. But what we know is this: Jesus endured a storm to heal these men who were hurting, and with one word had the ability to set them free. Showing us that Jesus was willing to go out of his way to meet and change hurting people. That he was able to see beyond the tombs, and he saw these men in heaven with him. He saw where they could be. You see, my story is something like this, that Jesus saw something other than the tombs. And he had a plan. I can't make sense of it. You see, when all I saw was torment and destruction, when I was trying to make sense of my trials, Jesus spoke life into my situation, and he made a difference. Because that's who Jesus is. And that's what Jesus does when he shows up, is he makes a difference. The last thing that we're going to see in verses 33 through 34 is that Jesus came to rewrite the end of the story. It says, then those who kept them fled, and they went away into the city and told everything, including what had happened to the demon-possessed man. And behold, the whole city came out to meet Jesus, and they were so happy to see him. And they just hugged him and lifted him up and worshiped him and sat him on the throne and followed him and repented of having pigs and all. They were... Oh, wait, that's not what it says. And when they saw him, they begged him to depart from their region. Begged him to leave. Most people beg people to stay, not leave. They begged them to leave. And again, we need to look at Mark and Luke's Gospels to get the complete account of what took place this day. But what we do know here is this, that these guys were, according to Mark and Luke's Gospels, that they were once crazy, but now they were in their right mind. They were totally in control. God had totally healed them. Meaning this, that these guys had the end of their stories rewritten. No longer would they have to dwell among the tombs. They could take off their grave clothes, and they could replace them with a robe of righteousness because of what Jesus had done. You see, too many people are walking in their grave clothes, when God wants to remove those and clothe us in a robe of righteousness. He wants to walk with us. We're told in the other two Gospels that these men wanted to follow Jesus, but he said, no, you can't go, you can't follow me. You need to stay here. You need to tell your story. In essence, Jesus made these guys missionaries. Think with me for a moment. If you were running a missions organization, and these two guys you knew showed up and turned in a missions application to be a part of your missions organization, would you accept them? I think it would have gone one of two ways. I think that these two guys would be totally rejected, meaning they would be impressed with their stories, but not sure if they wanted to associate with their lives. Or they would be elevated and marketed, meaning this: look who's on our team. Buy their books, grab their merch. Oh, and hear how good God is. That's what I would see happening. Yet what we know when we look at the full account, that these two guys, the most unlikely of missionaries, God sent them back into their own town, the town that had begged Jesus to leave, the town that ran Jesus out, that kicked him out. But it's a town that Jesus came back to later on. And it's a town that when he came back, because these two men's lives were changed by Jesus himself, because Jesus was rewriting the end of their story, when Jesus showed up the next time, all those who were sick, possessed, and in despair came running to Jesus, we're told. Because the best evangelistic tool is not a crusade, it's not a tract, it's a changed life. It's a life that walks with Jesus through storms with great peace. It's not a life that's absent of storm. It's life that presents Jesus as being present in the midst of storms. And here's what I want to encourage you with. I am so grateful that Jesus is still writing the rewriting the ends of people's stories. Think about it. As a pastor, I stand up and try to convince people that God is still rewriting the end of their story. You know how hard that is sometimes? When you're sitting down with somebody that's lost a child or has got a hurting family member who's been hurt by the church, and you're trying to explain to them, you know, God still loves you. That's a storm. He's with you. That's difficult. But my hope is this, that God is bigger than those storms, that God is bigger than those trials, that he's still rewriting the ends of people's stories. The stories of people who are hurting, the stories of people who are living without hope, the stories of people who are longing to be loved. That Jesus is willing to show up in their lives, see beyond what's, the tombs, and see the person and have his heart broken. That Jesus, who was willing to endure storms and rejection so that he could impact their lives. You see, Jesus is still our peace in the middle of life's storms. That never changes. And when I contemplated my story this week, it went something like this. When I was hurting and without hope, Jesus showed up to be my peace, reminding me that he's still writing the end of my story. And for the first 47 years of my life, I may not have liked the story. I may not have liked the first 47 chapters. But from 47 on, I began to see how that story was changing. And at 50, I have hope that God's still writing the ending. The bottom line is, it doesn't matter how much has been written or how much is left to be written. The bottom line is that there are people out there who are hurting and without hope. People whose demons long to destroy them. People who don't care about them, that just are going to use them. People who are facing various storms and wondering, where is Jesus in all of this? There's people that are out there who have rejected to Jesus today, but tomorrow will come running to him. And what I believe is this: today Jesus is reminding us that he still shows up. But he shows up in a simple word spoken to a calm storm. In a single word to transform the life of two demon-possessed men. He shows up in the presence and in the middle of despair. And he shows up, and oftentimes what he uses is one of the chapters in your story, that he might remind people that whatever they're facing is not the end of their story. Therefore, giving value to maybe those chapters in your life that you thought had none. Those chapters that you thought didn't make any sense. Those chapters you wish you could tear out and burn. But it's those chapters that Jesus was with us the most. You see, today is a day that what Jesus wants us to know is that he's still writing the ending. He's still writing the ending. And because of that, we can have hope that he's still in the middle of the storms, that he's still our peace, that he still sees beyond the tombs and sees the individual, and he's willing to go to extreme measures to meet us where we are, to change the ending, because he loves us. And so I want to encourage you guys today with this. Look at your story honestly. Every one of us has one of those but God moments, don't we? That you just can't make sense of. And it's those but God moments when Jesus entered your story to begin rewriting the ending. But it's also where he took that past and gave value to it. Value that says your life can impact, your story can impact a world of hurting people. Because your story is history, meaning his story of how he redeemed you when you were lost, when you were hopeless, when you were without value, when you were facing storms. And he showed up to be your peace. And he showed up and changed the outcome.